So we are super excited today. We have Thomas Oppel, who is the Executive Vice President of the American Sustainable Business Council. If you guys haven't heard of ASBC, you need to go check them out. Thomas joined the American Sustainable Business Council after more than 3 decades in management, communications, policy, and politics. He served as the Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy during the Obama administration. During his tenure, he helped manage the effort to meet the Secretary's ambitious goals to reduce fossil fuel use in the Navy and Marine Corps by more than 60% in just 5 years. David Kieve is the National Director of Climate and Conservation Engagement at Biden for President. He oversees all engagement issues related to climate and conservation for the Biden for President campaign, which is a role he's had since March. Before March, David served as the early stage director for Biden for President, overseeing the campaign's activities in the first 4 caucuses and primaries. He's a partner on a long-term leave of absence from Hilltop Public Solutions, a public affairs and political consulting firm. Thank you so much both for being here. I'm very excited, as I know a lot of others are. Obviously, we have a huge election coming up in just a few short weeks. And so this topic is incredibly timely. I do want to mention that we did offer the opportunity for the Trump campaign to participate in this session as well. And they are not responding to our request. So from here, I'll give it over to you guys.
Thanks, Heather. Connecticut Sustainable Business Council is a critically important partner with ASBC at the national level. We nationally represent about 250,000 businesses that are committed to the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profits. And obviously, climate change is an area that we are doing and have been doing for some time, significant amount of work in terms of education, advocacy, trying to build momentum and support in the business community. And many of the businesses that Heather works with here in Connecticut or that we work with around the country recognize what I thought was, and I mentioned this to David a little while ago, I thought the best summation I'd seen of the importance of climate change and its nexus to the economy is a sign that I saw being carried in the youth climate strike 2 years ago. And the sign said simply, there are no jobs on a dead planet. I don't think anybody can state it any more clearly than that, but if anyone can, it's David Kieve. As Heather mentioned, both her organization and ASBC have attempted to reach out to the Trump administration and the Trump campaign about working on climate change issues. Not very successfully, but what I thought we might start out with here is I would take the opportunity to open the program, David, by just posing a few questions to you, and we'll take that conversation, and then hopefully we'll open it up to the audience for their questions. So let me start, David, with the Biden campaign's engagement in climate. You've done some things that I think are pretty unusual and in many cases firsts. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing and why.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, let me say thank you to Heather and to the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council. And also one thing that Heather, I neglected to include in my bio, but perhaps I should add it back in. I'm a proud Trinity College alum. So I spent 4 years in Hartford.
Oh, trying to get the hometown crowd, huh, David?
I know the state very well and have spent a good chunk of my life in New England, although I'm in Washington, D.C. now. Thomas, you've done political work for a long time. I think a lot of people who are part of this discussion have probably volunteered on political campaigns. Doing political work is often akin to manning a complaint hotline. It's to some degree human nature that you hear from people when they're unhappy, but you don't hear from them when they're particularly happy. doing climate engagement for the Biden campaign has been the opposite experience. It's a hectic time. There's 13 days to go before the election. But we have built a really big coalition of folks who are really pretty happy with us. And they're happy with us for a number of pretty good reasons. First and foremost, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are running a historic campaign on climate. They're running on the most aggressive and ambitious climate change policy that we've ever seen from a major party ticket in a general election. And they're campaigning on climate every single day. So the fact that we're out there and that we see that the politics of climate have changed considerably over the past few years, and that the American people are no longer buying into this false narrative that there's a choice between doing the right thing for our planet and doing the right thing for American jobs and American workers, has really freed us up to go on offense and talk about this issue in a new set of ways. And I think that the membership of the American Sustainable Business Council and the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council, and the fact that folks are doing well while doing good, is proof that this false narrative was never true in the first place.
Tell me a little bit about, or maybe expand on this. You touched on it briefly. The connection that Vice President Biden sees between climate change, clean energy, and the economy.
Yeah, it's a great question, Thomas. Thank you for it. As I mentioned, we're running on the most ambitious set of climate change policies that have ever been put forward by a major party ticket in a general election. We're really proud of that. A question that I get all the time from folks who care about climate and climate change is, your policy sounds pretty good to me, but how do we know it's going to be a priority for your administration? And the answer I always give is simple, and it's always the same. Because our jobs and economic recovery plan, which is a piece of what we view as an absolute must-pass piece of legislation, is our climate change plan. And our climate change plan is our jobs and economic recovery plan. Our clean energy jobs commitment is an absolutely central pillar of our broader Build Back Better plan, which we've been campaigning on since we released it in July.
Talk about how the clean energy jobs commitment, how does that go farther than your climate plan, the base climate plan?
Sure. Well, just to share a little bit of context, if that's okay, climate was the very first policy that Joe Biden released as a presidential candidate. He released his climate change policy in June of 2019. It was first for a reason. Joe Biden instructed us that it should be first. I think one of the things that he's always intuitively understood that we as a campaign staff have had sort of a hard time translating to folks because it sounds a little bit transactional, is that climate change is an entry point issue especially for younger voters. And if we don't connect to them on a values basis and share with them that we understand it and share their commitment to tackling climate change, they're going to tune us out and they're not going to hear us on anything else. So that was one of the many reasons that climate change was the very first policy that we put forward after Joe Biden got in the race. As you might recall, it was an awfully crowded field. There were a great many folks who were out there campaigning. I think at one point it was 23 or 24 candidates for president, including a lot of really impressive folks. We're honored to make it through, but also stronger for having been in competition with so many great other candidates. But Joe Biden got in the race a little bit late. He waited until after, I think it was Easter, when he had a chance to discuss whether or not he should do this with his family and make a family decision that this was something he wanted to go for and something he thought the country needed. And then we got to work developing our policy on climate, which we released in June. I think our climate policy, our initial climate policy, didn't get the credit that it perhaps deserved. It set out a really bold ambition to get to 100% net zero by 2050. It talked a lot about climate in terms of conservation. It set a bold conservation goal of conserving 30% of our overall land and water by the year 2030, which is a near-term goal. And it talked about international commitments on climate change, committing us to rejoin the Paris Accord on day one of a Biden administration, but using that as a baseline and going far beyond that. as I've been talking lately about our original climate change plan, I've been describing it as kind of sneaky good. And I think part of the reason why it didn't get quite the credit that it deserved at the time was because there was such a strong field of other candidates, and because there were folks out there who, if you wanted a bigger price tag or a nearer term target, you could probably find it somewhere in a very large field. That having been said, one of the things that I try to convey to folks about Joe Biden and his approach to policy development is that he's very ambitious about what he decides that he's going to put forward as a set of policies. But he's also very honest. He reaches as far as he thinks he can reasonably get, and then that's what he'll put forward as a set of policies. And I don't think a lot of folks understand that he, on a really fundamental level, refuses to tell the American people he's going to do something that he doesn't think that he can deliver on. It's one of the reasons why I'm proud to work for him. So that's kind of where we started. And forgive me, it's taken me a long time to answer your question. But I thought that was an important building block to get to how we added to it. We released our clean energy pillar of our Build Back Better plan in July, but we've been working on it since March. In March, a couple of things happened. First of all, as it pertained to just us, it became pretty clear to us that Joe Biden was going to be the Democratic nominee. It was clear to Joe at the time, and I think we're going to hopefully reap some rewards from it, that it was important that Bernie Sanders and that Sanders supporters feel that they had a home in the Biden campaign and feel that they were respected by our campaign. It was important to Joe Biden that everyone who supported another candidate throughout the primaries knew that we respected their principles and wanted to bring them along and wanted to show them how serious we were on any number of different issues. So that was one thing that happened that was sort of specific to us. One of the things that happened that unfortunately was not specific to us, but that was has dramatically impacted every single person in this country, was the onset of the coronavirus pandemic and the accompanying economic collapse and all of the pain and hardship that came along with it. We recognized pretty early on that this was a historic setback for our country in terms of both public health and economic ramifications, but that historic setback also brought with it an opportunity to really build back better than we had before. So we, I think, took a hard look at the commitments we had previously made. We heard some of the criticism that was out there that, hey, 100% net zero by 2050 is a fine and good goal, but we need to see much more short-term action about how you're going to get there. And we set about to do it. And we did that in every major sector of the economy and in every major contributor to greenhouse gases that were out there. In the transportation sector of the economy, we set a goal to be #1 in the world in the production and sales of electric vehicles. We decided we were going to do that by providing the infrastructure and incentive to the American people to want to go out and buy those electric vehicles. And we critically made sure that our partners in labor unions, especially the United Auto Workers and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, had a seat at the table, were bought in from the start, and felt like this wasn't just our plan that we were trying to force on them, but that it was their plan as well, because they truly had a role in helping us to develop it. We also are going to get to #1 in terms of the development and sales of electric vehicles by reimagining the purchasing power of the federal government to put American manufacturers and American innovation first and foremost. And then lastly, for every city in America with over 100,000 people, which if I remember correctly, it certainly includes Hartford and Bridgeport and I think New Haven, we're going to help them develop clean energy-based public transportation alternatives. So that's how we're going to get there in the transportation sector. We said perhaps our most ambitious goal is to get to 100% clean energy in the power sector by 2035. In terms of buildings, we're going to retrofit 4 million buildings and weatherize 2 million homes. And then we're going to take do what Donald Trump had an opportunity to do when he was first elected and just wasn't interested in at all, and actually reimagine and reinvest in our infrastructure, our crumbling bridges and roads, our water infrastructure, but also our national power grid. So those are the big sort of sectors of our economy that we're going to get to, and that where we spent most of our time and focus with the clean energy portion of our Build Back Better plan.
So we're getting a couple of questions from our audience. Let me pitch a couple of these to you, David. The first, and I think this is an important issue, and it's important. I don't think it was so well handled in 2016 in the political campaign, and I think it's something that we have to address. Those of us who are committed to real climate change have to address. What about those folks who are in the coal industry, in the fossil fuel industry? How do we talk to them? How do we explain to them? What do we offer to them about their futures and their the jobs, the employment that might be available to them in the future? Is there retraining? Is that part of the plan? What is the Biden campaign offering?
That's very much a part of the plan. And it's also very much important in this space that we've earned the buy-in and support of major unions representing exactly those types of workers. I've already mentioned the IBEW and the United Auto Workers, but we've been saying the same thing absolutely everywhere we've gone. No surprise, because they are plumbers and pipe fitters after all, that the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters were strong supporters of the Keystone Pipeline. Joe Biden went to a training facility in Erie about a week and a half ago, and he stood there and talked about clean energy jobs, and he talked about rebuilding our water infrastructure. So if he's going to do that in front of that union, he's going to do it absolutely everywhere. So the fact that we've got union support, I think, gives us a certain amount of credibility with the workers who those unions represent or have represented, and some assurance that we're going to always put workers first. We are, of course, going to invest in disadvantaged communities. One of the things that's a key pillar of our our environmental justice plan is that 40% of benefits are targeted to go to impacted communities. That certainly includes coal communities.
Slightly different question. Meg Norman is asking, the pandemic requires swift and large actions. How would Vice President Biden keep sustainability as a strong part of his climate plan in terms of manufacturing personal protective equipment, medicines, vaccines, and the safe removal of massive amounts of medical waste?
That's a good question. That's a side of our Build Back Better plan that I'm perhaps a little less familiar with than our clean energy jobs piece of it. But sustainability is absolutely at the heart of everything that we're doing. Part of the $2 trillion, that's trillion with a T, investment that we intend to make to enact our clean energy jobs plan, a lot of that involves infrastructure. Our commitment is that every single penny of infrastructure investment that we spend is going to be spent in the most sustainable and resilient way that we possibly can. That's our outlook and where we're coming from. We have an entire pillar of our Build Back Better plan that deals with our approach to mobilization and making sure that folks have the personal protective equipment that they need. And another entire pillar of our Build Back Better plan that impacts what we call the caring economy, frontline workers, home healthcare workers, teachers. It really sort of elevates that work economically in a way that I think throughout this pandemic, all of us who have been watching those heroes in action see and think is merited.
One of the things, I'll just take a point of personal privilege here. I think one of the things that that this pandemic has demonstrated and in many ways in awful and harmful and hurtful ways, is the connectivity between all of these issues, that you can't deal with the economy and not deal with climate, not deal with healthcare. You can't deal with, the healthcare crisis without recognizing the impact it's having on our economy. As Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have said many times, we're not just facing the healthcare crisis, we're facing an economic crisis, we're facing a racial justice crisis, we're facing a climate crisis. All of those crises are related in many ways to each other. We know that Black and brown communities have been hit harder by this pandemic, are suffering more, are dying more frequently and suffering more severe healthcare impacts. They're also suffering more, in terms of the economy. And so, all of these impacts are totally related, and you can't, it's like that trying to build that house of cards. You can't pull out one card without the whole house collapsing. And I think we've seen that over the last 9 months, and hopefully we recognize, I think you said this earlier, David, that, the false choice we've been presented with for 30 years, and in many cases by organizations claiming to represent business, has been that, healthy economy, healthy environment, pick one. When in fact, we now recognize that is a completely false choice. We must have both in order to survive and in order to prosper. And that's frankly what ASBC and what the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council are all about. Let me get to a question. I know. Oh, sure. No, jump in. Go ahead.
I think, first of all, that's really well said and spot on. And I think, the way that Joe Biden has been talking about this, notably in his acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention, which was about as big a platform as he's had all to himself, certainly, apart from the debates, which are kind of a creature unto themselves. We knew that he was going to talk about 3 core crises facing this country. There's no way you can run for president and not talk about the global health pandemic that we're dealing with. There's no way that you can run for president and not talk about the economic collapse that accompanied it. And there's no way you can run for president, at least certainly not as a Democrat or as a caring, sentient human being, and not have a response to the really important discussion we're having as a nation about racial equity following the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and too many others. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that climate was going to be elevated to be a 4th national priority alongside those other 3. Those other 3 were always going to be included. Climate is in there because Joe Biden feels it, and he agrees with the sentiment that you just expressed exactly, Thomas, which is that climate is related to and exacerbates all of the other challenges and problems that we have. We absolutely view the COVID mortality disparity between people of color and white people as being a textbook example of an environmental justice issue.
So now the question I know you get all the time, carbon pricing. Does that fit into the plan? Does it not fit into the plan? And whether it does or doesn't, why?
It may. I don't want to be coy, but I also don't want to make policy for us on this call. I think we have expressed the full extent of our ambition through the 50 some odd pages of climate policy that we've put out throughout the course of this campaign. In our initial climate policy, I would point out that it left the door open for potentially a price on carbon or a carbon tax, was not particularly prescriptive about how that might work or what it might look like. But that has been a part of our thinking from the outset.
A couple of related questions, and I think someone was asking about whether the U.S. Should remain a party or get back into the Paris Climate Accord. You sort of answered that, so let me ask it in a slightly different way. Why is Vice President Biden, and this may seem like self-explanatory to this audience, but give you a chance to talk about it anyway. Why is it important that the U.S. be a party to the Paris Accords? And then related to that, there's a question about whether you've had any particular communication with those U.S. mayors, frankly, and others, the We're Still In coalition, who have opposed President Trump's withdrawal from Paris.
Yes. First of all, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord is a day one priority for the Biden administration. We're going to do it as soon as he is inaugurated, if we win, which we're going to do everything we can over the next 13 days to make sure happens. Second of all, we think it's awfully important to be a part of Paris, but to go beyond Paris and use it as a baseline and move past it in a more ambitious direction, because we've seen the alternative. Donald Trump's America First policy has left America standing all by itself. And we know that even if we were to get to 100% clean energy by, 2025, it still wouldn't solve that, which this can't happen scientifically and for lack of political will. But even if we assume that America could do that, it wouldn't solve the climate crisis on its own, because climate is a global issue that demands global leadership. One of the reasons why Joe Biden was picked by President Obama to serve as his right-hand guy and running mate was because Joe had spent decades on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He had relationships already with foreign leaders throughout the world. He knew how global politics worked. And one of the neat things about my old job as the early states director was I spent a lot of time on the campaign trail with folks like John Kerry, former Secretary of State, who was as responsible as anybody for negotiating the Paris Climate Agreement. So folks like Secretary Kerry and Joe Biden, they fundamentally understand that we are not going to solve climate change without America resuming a position of global leadership.
I want to go back to something you talked about earlier when you talked about pulling in Senator Sanders and his supporters. Let me ask you this question. I know there were a couple of candidates early in the Democratic primary who made climate a particular focus of their campaigns. The person who simply said, "Look, there's no other issue." Governor Jay Inslee of Washington State, Tom Steyer, very climate change was a critical part of his whole reason for running, as he made clear. Talk a little bit about what role, if any, they are playing in the Biden campaign, and what role they might play. I know you're right. I've been in politics before. None of us likes to think beyond the election, but what role presumably they might play in a Biden administration.
Well, I can't speculate about what role anybody will play in an administration that doesn't exist yet. But I can share.
Shoot, I thought I'd try.
They've played a huge role in our campaign. We borrowed a number of Governor Inslee's really great ideas, and they made their way into our updated commitments on climate. One in particular that we're proud of is a commitment that there will be an environmental justice office within the Department of Justice with real teeth and real enforcement and the ability to seek criminal jail time penalties for bad actors who pollute poor neighborhoods that are too often primarily comprised of people of color, and who have been, let's face it, dumped on and forced to breathe dirty air and polluted water because they lack a political voice. So that's a really important idea, and we credit Governor Inslee for developing it, and we're proud to take it and incorporate it into our policy. Tom Steyer is somebody I've had a pleasure of spending an awful lot of time with, especially lately. We've kind of had a traveling roadshow that's gone via Zoom across the country. We've done events in the past week with Lonnie Stevenson and Tom Steyer as the anchors with Governor Sisolak in Nevada. where he talked about, hey, we know we can do this, and we know we can do it with the support of the building trades because we've done it here in Nevada, where they have expressed a goal of 100% net zero by 2050 and are really investing in clean energy out there. We did events in Ohio yesterday, which got a great write-up in the Columbus Dispatch with Cindy Estrada, Vice President of the United Auto Workers, and Tim Ryan. And we did an event in Michigan last week with a state senator, also with Vice President Estrada from the UAW. So Tom has been out there. He's been one of our most active and engaged surrogates. He and Lonnie Stevenson, it's like, I tease them. We're going to make like a buddy cop movie about the two of them. They have become so close, which is a funny thing, given that Tom was a hedge fund manager for so long and so successful at it. And Lonnie worked his way up through the union from, an apprenticeship program like everybody else, but they really get along. And their co-chairmanship of our Climate Engagement Advisory Council has, I think, in unexpected ways to us, helped to make what already started as a big tent of folks who were supporting the Biden plan even bigger. That council also has folks like Congresswoman Deb Haaland from New Mexico, Carol Browner, the former EPA administrator, who's now the chair of the board at the League of Conservation Voters, and two really special environmental justice advocates, including my friend Cecilia Martinez, who I was so thrilled to see just about a month ago was named by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. So that's a really good group, and Tom's leadership within it is a testament to how bought in he is to this campaign.
Let me ask you about a different area, and honestly, I confess, as much as I've tried to be up to date on what both the administration is doing in the climate area or not doing, and the Biden climate proposals. One of the questions we've got, actually, there are two related questions. One is cuts to science-based education programs that support knowledge that may help us avoid the impacts of climate change, and then supporting legislation that will increase climate literacy. What's the Biden proposal for helping educate not just the kids in school, who I think may be more aware of these issues than we are in many ways, but educating all Americans to why this is important, what the dangers are. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mentioned this in something I wrote and put out through my little newsletter yesterday. So if anyone's already a member of Biden Climate Voters, you probably saw it, and I'll probably sound a little like a broken record. But as big of a problem as climate change is, there's an even bigger problem with Donald Trump, which drives their inaction on climate change and their willful action to promote policies that make our climate worse and pump more greenhouse gases into the air just to do it. And that's the same reason that he has so bungled the response to the coronavirus pandemic. He doesn't respect science, and he doesn't listen to experts. That includes public health experts, and it certainly includes scientists. We've seen him attack just yesterday Dr. Fauci, calling him an idiot. That's certainly nothing you would ever hear out of Joe Biden's mouth. So I think, and we've also seen his administration in ways big and small try to pump non-believers into key roles. They want people who don't believe in climate change overseeing the National Weather Service, which is insane. So I think you will see a stark course correction, we hope, if we do our jobs right, from a Biden administration in terms of our approach to science. We had a tweet yesterday. Trump was on the campaign trail 2 days ago, and he actually said to the crowd, if Joe Biden wins, he's going to turn this thing over to the scientists. And our tweet was just, yes. And it got 1.2 million likes. We've seen endorsements come in from lots and lots of groups that have never, ever endorsed and never imagined that they would endorse because they don't really engage in politics. Scientific journals like Scientific American and Nature and the New England Journal of Medicine have endorsed Joe Biden because they say, Donald Trump's approach to science and to experts is terribly dangerous. It's had a real human cost already, and it needs to end now. So I hope that's specific enough in terms of what we're going to do, but it is going to be a radical night and day departure. We're going to put scientists back in key positions. We're going to elevate them and listen to them.
Well, there's a guy who is famous on Twitter, who teaches at the Naval War College, and he and I often disagree politically. But Tom Nichols has written a book about the death of expertise. And I think science is just one area. I will say I've been heartened by the fact that we're now working with a coalition at ASBC to try and encourage first insurers about the risks of insuring new fossil fuel projects and the risks, frankly, of investing in fossil fuel companies. Something that even financial institutions and folks like Goldman Sachs are now starting to speak out publicly about the risks that are involved in investing in these fossil fuel companies. I'll also say I had the great privilege, as Heather noted earlier, working with the Secretary of the Navy in the Obama administration for 8 years. And I note that every single service chief, even today, will tell you that climate change is a national and global security risk, whether it's intensifying storms, rising sea levels, the impact on civil disruption and civil society around the globe. Never mind right here in the U.S. So I think whether it's scientists or our financial sector or our defense sector, the recognition is across the board that climate change, is a threat to this planet and to everyone on it. And as somebody once said, we don't have a planet B. David, last thing I'll ask you. I know we're getting close. I can see Heather. I can feel Heather, giving me the we're about out of time. So let me just ask for those folks who wish to get involved. Any last pitch on what they should be doing? And I apologize for all the questions that didn't get asked, but we'll try and get you answers down the road. But David?
Sure. I did put, just real quick, I'm sorry, I did put the link to ASBC in the chat. And David, if there's another link you want us to share, please let us know and we can do that as well.
Great. Let me drop it in right now, in fact.
Great, thank you.
And I will note while he's doing that at the beginning, if you're interested in getting involved, one way to get involved is to sign up for Biden Climate Voters. And there is a link right at the very beginning of the chat that enables you to do that.
Great.
Look, here's the elevator pitch on Biden Climate Voters. We are running a historic campaign on climate. It includes the most aggressive policy we've ever seen from a major party ticket. It includes talking about climate every single day when we're out there. It's a rare day when we don't have something come out of the Vice President or Senator Harris's mouth that talks about clean energy jobs and climate change. Climate change has been, it was a surprise topic in the first debate with Chris Wallace. It came up in the vice presidential debate. It is an announced topic tomorrow night. It should be. When Chris Wallace said, I want to talk about climate change, the vice president didn't miss a beat. He said, good, I do too. That's how he feels about it. So we want to add 1/3 sort of element onto those two core pillars, the fact that we're campaigning on climate and the fact that we've got the most ambitious policy. That's the most robust grassroots support we've ever seen from people who self-identify as, you know what, of course I'm voting for Joe Biden. And the reason why I'm voting for Joe Biden, or one of the reasons why I was attracted to his campaign, is because I believe we need to take drastic action to address climate change. If those two things both qualify for you, then you're already a Biden climate voter. So we would ask that you take 30 seconds, sign up and join us. If you're already on our campaign's email list, you won't get any more emails than you already get from us, except for 1 or 2 a week from me that try to be as substantive as they possibly can. and that highlight all of the ways that we are campaigning on climate. But good, thank you, John. I'm a terrible multitasker, but I did just see that pop up in the chat. What we get out of this is pretty simple as a campaign. This is what they call an engagement lever. It brings more people into our fold. Those people are more likely to take action that is helpful to our campaign, like signing up for a GOTV shift, signing up to help with our election protection efforts, or even helping to fund this massive beast that we have built on this campaign. What you guys get as a community of people who care about this issue is a proof point afterwards. If we win, and if we don't, the whole world's going to melt anyway. And I don't say that glibly. But assuming we do our jobs right and we win, this will be a third proof point that climate played a determinative role in this election, and it'll make it easier for us to claim a mandate to go further and be more ambitious in terms of the policies that we push for. Joe Biden has laid out what he intends to do. He's committed to push for every single one of them. But getting bills passed and through the House and the Senate can be hard. He knows it. We're going to need to show recalcitrant senators that we have a mandate and that we have popular support for this. And we hope that Biden climate voters is one of the many ways to do that. And I've said several times, and I don't want to contradict myself, that I don't want to speculate about what might happen after November 3rd. But I think it's pretty clear that a strong, robust community of people who care about climate change taking action in a grassroots-focused way. We've seen with some of the Obama for America stuff that happened after the Obama campaign in 2008, that you can point that towards support for your core policies. I think there'd be an opportunity to use the group in that way down the road.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. And everybody get out there and vote and drag somebody along with you.
Or 2 or 3 people.
Exactly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys so much.